What's up, everybody? Big Herc 916 back again, fresh out. You know how we do it over here. Got my man Owen Hanson in the house, California Kid, and we're here to address allegations of snitching. Somebody has brought it to our attention that they allege that Owen snitched on the case, so we want to air it out. We don't want any rumors out there, any misinformation. And so for those out there, Owen, who may have put some type of bad name on you or saying these different things, can you break down what the situation was as far as in Australia, with the people you were dealing with, your arrest and everything, and why this is kind of came up in discussion?
Hey, Herc, thanks for having me. I tell people, let's leave it up to your audience, right? Let's let them decide whether this is snitching, because you got to look at the big case and how everything went down, because nobody really knows the story. We got to rewind time to understand the case in its fulfillment, we got to understand the case in the big scope of things, okay? So 4 years before I was arrested in 2011, 2012, I had an attorney from Australia. I know you remember that I had a bag of cash picked off in Australia, $700,000. And this attorney by the name of Michael Croak came to me and said, hey, we can get that money back. He says, I have the barristers we can pay off, and if we get it back, are you willing to give me half? I said, sure, as long as you feel it's worth our while. And he says, mate, this is so easy. He goes, I got these people. I'll write a couple barristers. We'll pay a couple fines. We'll juice some hands, and we'll get the money back. I said, whatever. You're the lawyer. You decide what's safe for us. And that's what we agreed on. Fast forward another year goes by, and we're in, I think, end of 2012. Actually, July 3rd, 2012. It was the day before 4th of July. And the lawyer says, okay, we have this story we have to tell in order to get the money back. And he came up with this great story. He's using the ZZ Top promoter for Australia, that I loaned the money to ZZ Top's manager as partial payment. And from there, the ZZ Top manager repaid me this $700,000 back in Australia. And that's where the money came from, because the lawyer had this story manufactured. So if I had to go talk to the authorities and the ZZ Top promoter had to talk to authorities, we were on the same page. So the lawyer had the ZZ Top promoter visit me in the U.S. I remember we went to the Mondrian, and he says, hey, nice to meet you, mate. My name's Andrew McManus. He goes, I'm going to get a piece of this $700,000. I appreciate it. I need the help. He goes, we just want to be on the same story as this lawyer's telling us, right? So we're like, okay, cool. So that's what we went with. So I think it was first week of July, the ZZ Top promoter, Andrew McManus, went in and told this fabricated story that the lawyer gave us, right? Next, they call me. And this is, 4 years before my arrest. They call me, and the lawyer says, hey, I'm going to be at the police station, and I need you to go to the Beverly Hills police station, because they're going to call the Australian authorities and make sure we're all on the same phone via, I think it was like Skype back then. And I said, wait a minute. I said, we're in the U.S. We do not go to any police station, tell anything about anything illegal. I said, I'm not going to the police station. Let's stop this right there. I said, it's not worth it. For $700,000, I'm going to get half of that. I said, let's forget it. He goes, no, mate, it's not a U.S. matter. So Big Herc, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is my lawyer. So if he's saying it's not a U.S. matter, obviously he knows I'm safe. He goes, mate, it's an Australian matter. You have nothing to worry about. I'm like, all right, I'll agree. You want me to go to the Beverly Hills police station, and what do you want me to do? He goes, I'll be in on the meeting with the New South Wales Organized Crime Squad. I'll be there. I want you to tell your story that I gave you and let them know where the money came from, so they understand that they need to give it back to us. I'm like, all right, if this is what you want me to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take your legal advice. Remember, this is someone that's supposed to protect you, right? It's the court's police, basically, And I said, okay, If you say it's safe, I'm going for it. So I get there. I'm on this call in Beverly Hills Police Station. I'm like, okay. The Beverly Hills police officer goes, yeah, you got a call with Australia authorities. I don't need to be here. So I'm thinking, okay, maybe it isn't a U.S. matter, right? So I get on this call, and I got the New South Wales police there. And I'm like, okay, well, where's my lawyer? He's supposed to be there. He's like, your lawyer's not here. I said, well, let's call him. So you'll see this on the documentary. I call my lawyer, and I said, hey, Michael, where you at, man? You're my lawyer. You're supposed to represent me. He says, Mike, don't worry about it. I told you it's not a U.S. matter. Just tell the story that I told you to tell. So what did I do? I told the story. Now we got to fast forward. I get arrested. 2015, September 9th. Never forget that day. September 10th, I'm in this room with my new lawyer. I'm sitting there. And he pushes play on this little cassette tape of discovery he has. And guess what that interview was? It was the interview from that meeting. He says, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen anybody do. He says, what were you thinking by talking to the authorities? You just told on yourself. I said, what do you mean? My lawyer told me it's not a U.S. matter. He goes, this right here is probably what got you indicted. You just sealed the deal. So I was like, oh, fuck, dude. So I'm in my cell, man. I am fuming, Herc.
Wow.
I mean, I'm pacing. I'm like, okay.
So that whole recorded conversation?
That was my discovery. That was the first part of my discovery.
Wow.
That sealed the deal. And right then and there, I said, this motherfucker. I was hot. Herc, I was pacing in that cell. I was like, okay, this is fucked up, right? You're supposed to be my lawyer, and this is how you do me? So the whole time I'm thinking, okay, I see how it is. Boom, that same day, Australia is obviously a day ahead. So September 9th, I get arrested. It's September 10th in Australia. They arrest my contact in Australia, Andrew McManus, this concert promoter, and the lawyer. So we're all arrested, okay? And I'm like, okay. But I'm still holding my ground, right? I'm like, I'm good. I'm going to be all right. I'm not thinking anything of it. I need to focus on me. I'm not worried about them. So my first lawyer in the U.S., he says, you know what, we could probably, you're looking at a life sentence on. I said, life sentence? I've never even got a traffic ticket. What are you talking about, a life sentence? He goes, we could probably have you work on the street. I said, work on the street? What do you mean? I'm in prison. He's like, the prosecutor says, if you're willing to take down the cartel, they're willing to let you out and do your thing. I said, oh, no. That's not allowed. Like, hey, you want to kill my family? You want to kill my wife? You want to kill who? You want to kill everybody? Like, that's not part of this deal. Like, it's not happening. He says, well, the only way you're going to beat this life sentence is if you do that. I'm like, no, it's not happening. I said, man, let's run it, right? Fast forward, 2 years go by. I still haven't done anything. I haven't talked. I haven't done anything. My lawyer finally comes back. He says, man, I can't get you any deal. You got to either cooperate or you got to plead to the 30 years, right? I said, 30 years? Fuck that, man. I ain't pleading to no 30 years. And this is the kicker. He says, after the 30 years that you do in the U.S., you have a life sentence in Australia. I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, it's an Australian matter, mate. So I'm like, oh my gosh, Big Herc. I was like, man, this. So the lawyer told me, Owen, you got to shit or get off the pot, right? And when I heard that, I said, that's it. You're done, right? Like, this lawyer's not fighting for me. You're supposed to fight for my life, man.
Yeah.
I'm not taking no 30 years and then getting extradited and do a life sentence. You're out of your fucking mind. I remember I called my family. I said, hey, that $150,000 you spent on this lawyer, well, you might as well kiss that goodbye, right? We lost that. I said, do some research. This guy's telling me I'm getting a 30-year sentence and I'm getting extradited and I need legal counsel in Australia. I'm like, man, Herc, I'm going through it, man. I'm in my cell. I'm ready to tear up. You can't even do push-ups. I'm not eating. I'm like, man, my life's over, right? So finally my family does some research and they get one of the best lawyers in San Diego. He represented the Arellano Felix cartel, right? The man, right? He's gotten guys from life sentences to 20 years and from 20 years to 10. So I'm like, okay, how do we get him? So my family reaches out, and sure enough, he comes and visits me in MCC San Diego. And he goes, I know this prosecutor. He goes, why don't I talk to him and see what we can do? And I'm like, oh, fuck, this is, I said,
there you go.
I said, I'm like, well, like, where have you been, right? Like, you know, I've been looking for you for this whole time. Like, I wish I didn't lose the 150 that I just spent for, 8 months, 9 months. He's like, don't worry, let me see what I can do. So he goes and he speaks to the prosecutor. He comes back a week later. He goes, okay. He says, you are facing a life sentence. You are going to get extradited. There's no doubt about it. I'm like, man, I'm just like, my heart drops, right? I'm like, that's it. My life's over. 30 years, life sentence in Australia. So a life sentence in Australia is like 25 considered. So I'm doing the numbers. I'm like, 78 years old, I'm going to be out, man. Like, I might as well just kill myself now, right? 78, Herc. So this is where my mind, like, okay, what do we have to do? Like, this is where I have to play chess, right? Yeah. Everyone's playing checkers. I'm playing chess. And I tell people this story, and they're like, Owen, like, how did you get out of this mess? And my whole life, my back's been against the wall, right? And I figure out a way to get out of it. And listen, I admit, I belong in prison. I broke the law. But I don't belong in prison for 30 years. I don't belong in prison in Australia. It's a U.S. matter, and I need to be tried here. So I'm telling my lawyer this. He's like, listen, the mandatory minimum on this is 10 years. He says, cocaine carries 10 years. It doesn't matter if you have 1 kilo or 300 kilos. It's a 10-year mandatory minimum. So put that in your head. So, okay, I'm cool with 10 years, right? Like, I could do 10. Like, I'm thinking that in my head. That's what I'm going to get. He's like, but the problem is Australia wants you. He says, we got to make a deal. I said, what do we got to do? And he says, you got to have Australia come over here, the authorities, and the prosecution in the U.S. have to come together, and you are going to go in and tell on yourself. I said, what do you mean I got to tell? He says, everyone on your case has already pled guilty. This is in April of 2017. Remember, we were arrested in 2015. Everyone's already taken deals. I was like, okay, well, I said, I got to run this by some lawyers in Mexico, right? Because I don't know, what am I allowed to say? Like, I can't just go start telling on people that haven't been arrested. He's like, that's fine. They're going to come over in April. This was like 2 months before. And he says, we need to figure it out. So I'm like, man, like, who are they going to ask about? I'm thinking, like, through my head, like, okay, let's start at the bottom. Bookmakers. Matt Boyer. Okay, my best friend. A year before I was arrested, he got raided, and he came to me and says, Owen, the FBI came to my house, and they're coming after you. And I'm like, okay, I got to tell on Matt Boyer. I'm not going to tell on him, right? But they already know about him. So,
but that was in a whole nother matter.
Yeah, no whole nother matter. But you have to be honest when you go in these meetings. You go in this meeting with the government. They know everything already. People don't understand that. You're going into something that if you lie, it's over. The deal's off the table. So I knew they were going to ask about Matt because I already knew they had gone to his house a year before. And I knew Matt had a tie to one of my runners named Paulie. So I went up the chain, right? Okay, they're going to ask about Matt. I better call Matt, right? I called Matt. I said, Matty, I said, this is on the federal phone. I said, they're trying to give me 30 years in the feds. I said, they want to extradite me to the U.S. I said, they're making me go tell on myself. I said, it's going to help me in the long run. I said, I'm not going to get people indicted. I'm not telling on the cartel. I'm not telling on the mob. I said, but I got to tell the truth, man. Like, how did I meet Paulie? I met him through a bookie named Matt. He says, Owen, they already know about me. He goes, I'm not worried. He says, do what you got to do. You ain't doing no 30 years. This is one of my best friends. So I said, you're cool with me talking about you as a bookie? He's like, they already know about me, bud. Do what you got to do. So I was like, okay, I got that off my back. And then the lawyers from the cartel come in, and I explain it to them at MCC San Diego. And I let them know what's happening.
But has anybody from the cartel been arrested?
No,
oh, okay.
No one's been arrested.
But they know what's going on.
They know. They're sending lawyers in and out. Oh, always checking in.
They're not
hey,
messing around.
They're not messing around.
Yeah.
Hey, do you need anything? This is how the lawyers in Mexico work. No one really knows this. But they come in, and they have a file, and they say, Mr. Hanson, you know who we're here with. We think this information in here could help you get your sentence off. A reduction. So if you want to look at it, we can tell on these people, and we'll get your sentence down. I'm like, dude, I said, I don't know anything about these people. I'm looking at it like, I'm not going to get caught up in a lie, you know? So I said, that's not an option. Because this is what they want you to do. They want you to take this file. okay, this John Doe was a big narco out of Mexico City, and he was transporting 1,000 kilos, and they want me to give this information to prosecution. But you got to remember, this is the cartel's rival. So, and this is how they work.
Oh, by knocking off
their rival. So I can't do this, Herc, because I'm going to get caught up in a lie, right? And if you lie, like I said, all bets are off. My lawyer said, you're going in, you got to tell the truth. They know everything. So I can't take this information about New Generation Cartel and say this, and this. And then they're going to say, okay,
like
well, where did you meet him? Where was this? And I'm stuttering. You know, it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It ain't happening.
Wow.
So I'm telling them, like, okay.
It's a cold chess game,
It's
man.
a chess game, man. I'm going, I can't do that. I said, what can I do, man? I'm thinking, right? I said, I know what I can do. I said, I'm not lying. I can do this. And I asked the lawyer. I said, I picked up a passport for El Jefe. I picked it up in Guatemala when I had to pick up one of my passports because we had fake names. I said, am I allowed to use the name I saw, El Jefe's name? Am I allowed to use that name, Hector Velasquez? Because that's the name I saw him as on the picture. They're like, we allow that. We'll allow that. They know damn right that's not his name, right? So I'm not lying because I saw that picture. It's a physical thing, and now I can go into that meeting. And that's what I did, Herc. I went into that meeting. But you got to remember, I went into that meeting in 2017 of April 5th and April 6th. And I told on myself, okay, so I want to break down this paperwork because no one on this paperwork has ever done any time off of my testimony against me telling on myself. These people were arrested already that are involved in Australia.
And let me point out something about the paperwork. The paperwork, just for those out there, was emailed to us from somebody in Australia after having watched your initial interview. And we brought to your attention because people always, well, hey, what are you going to do about it? Well, what we're going to do about it is address it.
We're going to address it. And I don't think anyone's ever addressed this, right?
No.
I'm not hiding behind anything. I'm telling you how it went down. I'm not scared. I'm still here. If I was telling on the cartel, guess what, Herc? You and I wouldn't be here. You know that.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen. So I went in there and I said, all right. They started asking questions. Boom, the first question. Let's read it. Line 28 through 29. They're asking me, okay, we want to know about your drug importation into Australia. Bet. I, Owen Hanson, I'm going to read it, just line item. In relation to 2011, I originally came out to Australia to help a male called Rafa import cocaine into Sydney from Los Angeles. I was referred to Rafa by Hector, whom resides in Mexico. Hector was one of my contacts that I have also described later in my statement. He has been a supplier of cocaine to me in the U.S. I had dealings with him right to my arrest in 2015. I also refer to Hector as being Mexican Hugo. That is another name I use for him. In 2013, 2014, Hector was bringing in cocaine importation of about 75 kilograms at a time from Mexico. I was able to buy some of that cocaine. Line item 29. Hector introduced me to Rafa through BlackBerry emails. Hector originally knew Rafa from Europe. Hector and Rafa had been working together in Spain and some parts of Europe. I believe they were sending cocaine from the U.S. or Mexico into Europe. It is one thing I never asked in detail, though. It wasn't my business. Good. Okay, so now what do we need to do? We need to figure out who this Hector is. Oh, wait, it's Mexican Hugo. So did anyone get arrested by the name of Hector or Mexican Hugo? I haven't seen it. I've been in prison 10 years. I didn't get any time off. So I told on somebody that's a ghost, right? But I fucked up, Herc. I just told on a guy named Rafa, right? And Rafa was the person who was purchasing the dope in Australia. But Herc, this is where it gets good, okay? So I'm going to pull up what I found, Like I told you, it was a game of chess. People don't understand that. Rafa was killed in 2014. In 2014, we have an article right here. Suspect murder of Rafa Joseph. The New South Wales government has announced a $1 million reward for information into the 2014 Remember that year, 2014. Disappearance and suspect murder of Rafa Joseph. Herc, when did I get arrested? 2015. When did I tell this statement? 2017. So I told on a dead guy.
Yeah.
So are you telling me I got credit for telling on a dead guy? You've been in the feds. Do people get time off for telling on dead people? No, right?
No.
So I'm telling the truth. That's what the government wants. They want to make sure I'm telling the truth,
Yeah.
and they're verifying all this.
They want to just connect the dots.
They want to connect the dots. So then we fast forward. Let's go to line item 40. Line item 40 says, I would be told to go to various apartments in Sydney, wait for packages to be delivered by DHL or FedEx. After I have verified the package had cocaine, I would leave the package in an apartment and someone would collect it. The cocaine was sold at low price. However, the group made approximately $500,000 per month. Okay. Now, is that telling when I say DHL and FedEx? I don't know who they are. I'm not dealing with John and Juan from DHL, and I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
So the guy that sent you this paperwork worked for DHL. He did time. But guess what? I don't know who any of these people are, because you got to remember, when we talk on these encrypted phones, we know people as Mexican Hugo, like I told you. I was Don Corleone. There's Mr. Spice. There's Mr. Tino. I don't know who those people are. I know them by a handle. Mm-hmm. Do you think if I say, oh, Mr. Don Corleone was the one that emailed me, they're going to be able to get an arrest off that? No fucking way.
So this person, did you ever meet him?
Never met him. I don't even know who he is. But he worked for DHL. And he got arrested later down the road. But what he doesn't understand is this interview was given on April 2017. He got arrested way before then. So this has nothing to do with him. I don't even know who the guy is. I've never dealt with anyone. This guy is a minion. All he does is receive packages and gives them to whoever. So I don't know who's receiving the packages. All I say is someone's bringing me something from DHL and FedEx. That's it. So is that cooperating, telling on a corporation? I don't think it is, but let's leave it to the viewers, right? And then we talk about page 13, Andrew and Nathan Dooley. This is a good one, okay? Because people are like, oh, you're telling about people in the drug game. Well, this needs to be addressed because, like I told you, the government gave me that option of going in on the cartel and letting me out, and I said no. So one of the key components to my indictment was I used to send all my product through a chocolate company, and there were two brothers from USC. And I had hired them, and I was giving them $50,000 a month to basically give me expired pallets of chocolates. And when I got indicted with 23 people, the two brothers weren't on there. So I'm thinking to myself, well, hell, if they've been watching us, they obviously know about the brothers, right? These guys are the key component of my logistics. I'm putting the kilos of cocaine in their chocolate, and we're using their vehicles to move the chocolate. So I'm thinking to myself, why haven't these guys been indicted, right? Why aren't they on my indictment? So I do some research. Like I said, I have the cartel attorneys coming in. I have my attorney coming in, and they say, hey, you know those brothers? They said, we just found out that they're working with the FBI and DEA. And guess what? They're trying to take down El Jefe. I'm like, oh my God, these guys are crazy, right? Like, these guys know what they're dealing with? And this is before I go into this interview, keep in mind. So we got right here, page 13, people want to say, oh, you're telling on people in the business. Well, listen, these guys were working with the U.S. authorities, FBI and the DEA. So when I went in on this meeting and told them what they did, of course they know. They're already working with them hand in hand. They're using their encrypted phones. They're sending messages through their encrypted phones to talk to El Jefe, the boss of the
Without
company.
you knowing?
Without me knowing. I was locked up. So I didn't know until about year and a half later. So I'm going into this interview knowing that I don't care what I say about these guys. These guys I already know are working with the FBI. They're confidential informants. So Tank and I are at MCC. We're shooting kites through the vents. You know, in prison, Tank was on the floor above. I was below. And we're sending messages through the toilet vent. Hey, Tank, did you hear about the brothers? He's like, nah. He said, they're working with the feds, man. They're out there right now. And the way I found out is my lawyer brought me this paperwork, and it showed a 276 kilo bust. He's like, do you know anything about this? And this is before this interview. I said, 276 kilos. And then I saw the chocolate company's name, LBB Imports. I was like, oh my God. He's like, these guys are, they're out there on the street working with the feds right now. I said, no way. I said, is that why they're not on my indictment? He's like, yeah. He says, so make sure you mention them when we go in that meeting. Otherwise, you're not being honest. And if you're not honest, you're not going to beat that life sentence and that extradition, right? I'm like, okay. I'm telling them, fuck it. Like, these guys are working with the feds, the DA, so that's what I did. I said, in regards to the Dooley brothers, Nathan and Andrew, when I started using them, I can say the following. I have already provided this information in the reports. Nathan and I went to school at USC. We also had mutual friends. His wife's best friend was one of my friend's wives. I'm not going to say the people's names because they're private. They went to each other's wedding as well. I do not know if Nate is still married to his wife, but I know her name is Bleep. Nate was married to Bleep's ex-wife. I did not see Nate for years until Bleep got married. The wedding was in Palm Springs. And then I'm basically saying, I spoke to them briefly at the wedding, and I know he was a UK chocolate business supplier for a company in US. It was a family company. We had a few cocktails and I asked him, hey, can you ship across to London, Europe, and Australia? I went on to ask him if we could get coffee for a drink back in LA, and he said, sure. So I go back and I have coffee with him. Remember, this is before my arrest. And I made that deal. I said, $50,000 a month cash, all I need is your expired chocolates. And I told that here, knowing that these guys were already working with the DEA and FBI, because everyone on them are indictments. Like, why are these guys here?
Did they do any time?
They did 11 months.
Oh,
They
shit.
shipped over a ton of cocaine for El Jefe, and they did 11 months, the brothers. That's what the RDAP. So you know what a mandatory minimum is on a ton of cocaine. It's 10. So these guys are squares, though. At the end of the day, I'm not mad at them. Mm-hmm. People are like, oh, these are your friends, they rat on you. They went to USC, man. Like, what do you expect? We're not dealing with gangsters, right? And that's what I tell people. We're businessmen. At the end of the day, this is the new generation. And there's people that tell and do that. That's a whole different type of telling. Like, that's taking it to a whole nother level. You're putting your life in jeopardy.
Yeah, when you're talking about like doing three-way calls or federal agents and
Correct.
making deals, and then they go and when the guy goes to make the deal, you bust him. Basically, you're getting the guy directly caught up in a case where he wouldn't have had a case otherwise.
That's right. And to me, that is what I call snitching or ratting, because you're setting people up and getting them arrested. No one in this paperwork was not arrested. They were arrested the same day I was. And I, out of respect to these people, you got to remember, these guys in Australia, these guys I talk about, Craig and Harry, I still respected them as men, even though these are the guys that introduced me to the FBI agents. See, no one knows about that either. So the FBI went on a yacht in Australia in 2013, and they infiltrated my connects over there, and they told them they were in the business, the same line of business, and my guys are like, what business is that?
Did the connects know they were FBI agents?
They didn't know. They didn't know.
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew. My connect in Australia said, hey, mate, we got these Australian/American money launderers that all they do is launder money back for people. I'm like, that's awesome. How'd you meet them? He goes, they were on this yacht party. He's like, we should use them, mate. I said, well, what do you want to do? He says, I'm going to give them some money right now, and let's see how they do, right? So he sets up a golf tournament, or a golf tee time, and this FBI agent that I don't know is an FBI agent at the time shows up, and he gives me the money minus his 10% cut. So I called my mate in Australia. I said, mate, he gave me the money minus his percentage. He goes, let's keep using them. So for 6 months, buddy, we're playing golf. We're million here, million there, 500 there, 250. And I'm just taking the word of my mate, right? Like he gave me these people. So, okay, so I'm talking about someone that gave me a federal agent to work with. Yet he still did not do time. Nowhere in here will you see that Craig Hauser did time. And this is the guy that I talked about in here. Okay, so is that ratting? A guy that gave me a federal agent? I don't think so. If it's ratting, he should have got some time, right? He didn't get any time. Did I get any sentence reduction off this testimony? No. This was just to help myself connect the dots, like you said, to bring that 30-year sentence down to, somewhere in the 20s, hopefully, right? So you got that. So, and then I want to go to the last issue. What did I talk about? My friend Matt Boyer. Everyone wanted to know, when I was in there, they said, well, how did you meet Paulie? Paulie was my go-to when I used to send wine. I used to send wine and cocaine, and Paulie would pick it up, and he'd go to Napa Valley, and he'd ship the wine from Napa Valley, and it was filled with cocaine. And we did this for a long time. But Paulie never got arrested, Big Herc. I'm like, why is he not in this? If these feds were watching me, I mean, Paulie was working for me every week, delivering 24 wine to Napa, and from there shipping it to Australia. Like, they need to know about him. What's that mean, Herc?
He's working.
He's working. So they asked me a question about Paulie, like, how did you meet Paulie? And this is where, thankfully, I called my boy Matt. And I said, well, you guys should know who I met Paulie through. I said, you guys arrested him a year before. And let's go to line item 68. Paulie Iotti would pick up from LBB to take them to DHL. I met Paulie through a friend of mine that is a bookie. His name is Matt Boyer. He is a bookie in Orange County. Paulie is a client of his. We would play golf, and I met him through golf. Paulie was looking for work. He has a gambling problem, so I put him to work. He ended up owing me, and he was always in the hole. He had a bad gambling problem. I would give him a $10,000 line of credit on my gambling website, BetOdog. He would lose it, then he would be working for me for free. Paulie was working for me for cash, and sometimes to pay off his debt. So, like, what were we doing, Herc? We are playing chess, baby. Like, this man had a gambling problem. I had to put him to work.
Oh, God.
But I knew Paulie wasn't indicted, so I knew I had to tell him how I met Paulie. I knew this was going to come back around. That's why I made that phone call to Matt.
Yeah, so he called me from prison, and obviously he was already in a jackpot. And, he was looking to obviously help himself in any way possible, without ratting on people, so to speak. And I said, look, they already know. They raided me in 2014. They asked me a lot of questions about you, Owen. And I said I wouldn't answer them. I just told them we're golf buddies. I said, but at the same time, a year and a half later, you got, busted. So they already know I'm a bookmaker. So if you need to tell them that to help yourself, by all means, man, just tell them. And
Okay.
so that's how that went down. And, clearly the feds already knew I was a bookie, so I wanted to help my friend any way I could.
And why did they need to know about you anyway? What was that? What was the relevancy of him mentioning you in his case?
That part I don't know, because obviously they were probably still investigating a number of leads, and they're always looking for leads. But I truly don't know what the purpose of their conversation was, between him and them at that point.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, because I just wanted to get clarification on that, because he did mention that he talked about you to the feds. So we want to get figure out why and what that entails. So I appreciate you answering those questions.
Of course, Big Dog. I'm here to help, and Owen's my man, and I was happy to help him at that time as well.
Now, what about the recording that I heard of allegedly the attorney in Australia saying stuff about you that they played for you? Because the lawyer,
That's where it gets good. Herc.
Yeah, I heard he wants to tell a story that you told on him, but let's clear the air about that.
Yeah, let's clear the air.
Yeah, about
so
that.
We got to remember, we were all wiretapped. In Australia, you can wiretap a car, you can wiretap an office, you can wiretap a home,
Damn.
you can wiretap a legal office. They had Michael Croak, the attorney's his office was wiretapped of his law office.
So no attorney-client privilege.
Not over there.
Wow.
His car was tapped. Their condo was tapped. Everybody in this whole thing, the concert promoter, Craig Hauser, myself, the bodyguard that was my security over there, everybody was wiretapped. And this whole time we're telling this fake story. Okay, so what am I going to say? And they're listening to it all. So they're listening to us to collaborate on the story, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward, I get arrested. I don't hear, when I'm listening at my discovery, I obviously don't hear everything between me and the lawyer. Now I start to get to hear all the little pieces that they're talking about when I'm not on the phone. And this is the one where I felt like a sucker, Herc. I said, man, I looked in the mirror and I said, man, does this say sucker on my head? The guy thinks I'm a fool, right? This is the lawyer. He says, oh, that American doesn't have a clue. He ain't getting half of this money. I'm taking it all. I'm like, okay. That was like the straw that broke the camel's back, Herc. I was like, okay, I'm going to remember this. So what happens, Herc? I get sentenced to 21 years because since I told on myself and I admitted responsibility, it's called taking responsibility, right?
Yeah.
You get 2 points
2
off,
points
sometimes
off,
3.
That's right.
You know, so you get those 3 points off, so that 30 went down to like 21, right? I accepted responsibility. I took it on the chin. A lot of people, oh wow, you ratted. Okay, Herc, nothing happened to this. No one got arrested. No Rafa got arrested. He was dead. Mexican Hugo. I don't think they could find a Mexican Hugo. There's a lot of Mexican Hugos, right, in Mexico, and there's a lot of Hectors. There's a lot of Hectors in Mexico. So I don't think they found them. Yeah. Okay. Everyone else on here was arrested the same time as me. So how am I going to get time off for something that already had happened? Yeah. Now, if I went in before, and this was in like 2013, this interview, and they got arrested in 15, then I would get time off. But that's how the government works. You don't get time off for telling on yourself for other people. That's not how it works. So you have to understand. I got that sentence, Herc. I was sad, man. I was like, my life's over. 21 years, done. I'm like, at least I don't have to worry about Australia, right? Like, that was part of the deal. If you tell on yourself, this is a U.S. matter now, you're not going to get extradited. My attorney's like, this is the whole reason we're going in. You're going to beat a life sentence in Australia. Hopefully we get your sentence down in the U.S. I'm like, okay, that's what we got to do, right? The government was asking for 20 years. My lawyer was asking for 10 because that was the mandatory minimum. Usually, with a good judge, they split the baby and give you 15. Mm-hmm. The judge didn't agree. He felt that this was worth 21 years, and that's what he gave me, 255 months. And I was sad, man. I was depressed. I said, my life's over. I remember going back to my cell that day, and I was like, man, I want to do a shot of heroin, just end it, right? Like, that's how my mentality was. I was like, fuck the world, fuck this, fuck that. But I remember, Eric, I looked back and I saw everyone, 15 family members, people from Mexico were there, people from, all my family was visiting from overseas. My dad and my mom from all out of state were there, and they're crying, right? And I'm like, if I kill myself, I'm killing them, right? Like, I'm hurting them. Why am I going to hurt people? I don't need to hurt anybody else, right? And I just stood strong, man. And I remember the lawyer saw me the next day, and he's like, yeah, man, sorry for your luck, but man, you never know. You never know what could happen. I said, what do you mean never know what could happen? He's like, you just never know, right? Like, I said, what does that mean? Like, you know, like, he's just like, what does that mean? He's like, you never know. Like, I felt like he knew something, right, Herc? Like, what's that mean?
Yeah, what does the never know?
Like, what's that mean? He's like, you still got a chance. You still got a chance, maybe like a Rule 35. I'm like, well, what's a Rule 35? He says, if anything happens in the future and you're willing to do anything, maybe we get you your time off. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I've never heard of this. Like, what's this, right? He's like, it's a long shot, right? So fast forward, Herc, I go to prison. I'm in prison now, like 3, 4, let's see, I was in 2017. 2020, I'm in I'm in United States Penitentiary of Lompoc. And at 2 a.m, I get a call from the
2 a.m?
2 a.m. It was like a knock on the cell door. I'm like, holy shit, like what? Like, it's a knock, and they crack the gate and they slide it open. It's like all automated, and they only open my door. So I was like, what the fuck? Like, Hanson, report to R&D. I'm like, what? This is 2 a.m, and the correctional officer comes. He goes, you're getting extradited to Australia. I said, Australia? I said, man, my case is over, man. They told me I'm not going to Australia. What are you talking about? Yeah. He's like, you're going to Australia? I said, what? Dude, there's no way, man. My lawyer says we're not facing any time in Australia. He's like, we can't talk about it.
The marshals, right?
Yeah, the marshals, right? The marshals are there. They padlock me. They take me to MDCLA. They put me in in a cell over there. I'm like, man, I'm freaking out. Like, I'm getting extradited to Australia. I thought this life sentence was over. Like we had an agreement, right? Like, I can't get a hold of my lawyer. They're like, no, you can't talk to him. We'll let you talk to him once you get to Australia. I'm like, dude, I'm freaking out here. I'm like, man, I got to talk to my lawyer. I didn't want to board the plane.